Hello and welcome everybody to the Twins Off Daily podcast brought to you by the fine folks at twinsdaily.com, your finest source for all independent Minnesota Twins coverage. How the heck are you, Twins territory? I am so happy to be back from my eternal sabbatical that I had to take. I think you all heard the kerfuffle that I got busted for robbing an orphanage. Was it, Gregory?
Yes.
And luckily, I am out of the clink now, and I'm just so happy to be back here with everybody on our favorite podcast here. So we are so happy to be with you. I am gathered here with Gregory T. Masterson and Theo Tollefson. How are you, fellas? Let's start with you, Greg. What's new? What's new since my incarceration?
Well, you missed a great show last week. I'm surprised that we finished recording it before we started recording this one. So
Yes.
we missed you dearly, keeping everything on track. Never leave us again.
I would never dream of it, my friend. Would never dream of it. Mr. Theo Tollefson, what's good, pal?
Can it really be an internal sabbatical if you're already back?
That's a good question. Or am I
Yeah.
back? Well, that's the real question here, Theo.
Yeah.
We're getting philosophical. We should probably jump right back into baseball before we get
Yes,
too
we
far
should.
out there. We are, like I said, we are the Twins Off Daily podcast, trying to bring you some content on every Twins off day. And would you look at that? We get 5 days in a row with you, my friends. Right? 5 days, 5 off days. Is that right? Holy cow, we better rest our vocal cords because we have a full week ahead of us today, or this starting today. Today's episode is going to be pretty classic, the format that we've been dealing with for our first 9 episodes here. The rest of the week, we're going to have some fun stuff mixed in for you, though. So please stick around. Please share our content. Please get more people involved. We love fostering this community, and we just want it to grow. So thank you so much for being here. Let's start it off with our walk-off question that we are going to answer by the end of the episode today. That question is, which fictional baseball player would you add to this Twins roster? Ooh, there's a lot of options, whether we're talking movies, we're talking TV, we're talking video games, we're talking classic literature, you name it. We're talking, we want to know which fictional baseball player we would add to this Twins roster. But before we get to that, let's get to some of our other fun topics, starting with our rapid recap. Okay, so this was just a quick turnaround for us, obviously. I think we're just dealing with the San Francisco Giants series here. And full disclosure, we are recording this before even the start of Game 3 here. So we know that the Twins are going to be at least 1-1 from this series. So we can kind of break that down, just who's looked good in these last couple of games, who's hot and who's not, and other things that have caught our eye. So let's start with you, Mr. Gregory. In the small sample that we have here, have you gleaned anything new from this Twins team as they have faced the Giants 2 times?
Well, I want to say that the All-Star break is coming at the right time. I know that that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but we've seen, looks like Jose Miranda just went on the IL today as we're recording. We've seen Jair Camargo come up, not play. Christian Vasquez play third base. Byron Buxton had a little bit of a collision in the outfield game 1 and is now has not played the last 2 games, or at least he's not starting Sunday, and he did not play on Saturday. It's a little bit of a mess right now, and we're fortunate. I think Diego Castillo, I know as people are listening to it, the game's already over, but Diego A. Castillo is making his Twins debut this year, not to be confused with Diego Castillo, the pitcher, who has pitched for the Twins, left and come back, and is now in St. Paul. It's a good time for the break to come up, give these guys a few days off their feet. Carlos Correa also has not played over the last 2 days. I don't know if I mentioned that. So that's a little bit of a mess for the Twins right now.
Yeah, just kind of touching on your first point there about Jose Miranda going on the injured list. By doing this, they're doing it retroactive to a few days ago. And I think there's a possibility that if he comes back as early as possible, he would only miss one more game after the All-Star break, I want to say.
Yeah,
So
one or
I'm kind
two.
of curious. I'm curious how big of a deal it is, how, injured or hurt he actually is. And if they didn't have this All-Star break right here, if they would still put him on the injured list. It's kind of curious to see. But Theo, what do you think? What's caught your eye so far in these last couple of games?
Yeah, no, the injury bug has finally shown its ugly face, and it's in everyone. They just announced that Correa has plantar fasciitis in the other foot, his right foot.
Whoa.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that it's all just coming apart at the right or wrong time, however you want to look at it. Still not great, but at least they have 5 days, and it's very unlikely Correa is going to play in the All-Star game now if that's the case.
Oof, that would stink. I would not like to see that. We'll talk more about the All-Star game a little later, but yeah, hopefully this isn't such a nagging injury as it was for him last year. It'd be nice if he could kind of overcome it a little bit, but
Mhm.
we'll see what happens. The big thing for me, I guess, was just when they did call up Yair Camargo instead of somebody like Edward Julian, it immediately came back to bite him in the butt, it seemed like, because they had Christian Vasquez playing third base. I felt like I was in a fever dream. That is obviously not ideal. He is not somebody that I want playing third base. And we saw a few plays last night when I was like, ooh, I really wish we had somebody a little more agile there. So that's unfortunate, but now we get to see Diego A. Castillo, which, Theo, you're one of the foremost followers and of the St. Paul Saints, I guess I should say. You cover them professionally here. What can you tell us about Diego A. Castillo? What should we be looking for him in this hopefully small sample size we see of him?
Yeah, no, he's someone who can, play third, short, second base pretty well. So you got that mobilization around the infield with him. He's got some good contact skills, bats the ball when he gets that. A little bit of power, but not too much. I'd be absolutely shocked if he hits one in San Francisco, just because it is not a hitter-friendly ballpark, as we all well know. But yeah, I mean, he's playing at third today, which doesn't surprise me. He's had a lot of games there. I want to say the majority of them have either been third or shortstop. Probably third with Brooksley when he was having his 20 games down with the Saints. So, yeah, no, I mean, he's a good hitter, good guy. So glad to see him get another opportunity. He was up with the Orioles last year and played, I want to say, like 90-some games with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2022 for his rookie season. So he's already exceeded that. 96 games is the number. So, yeah, it's a good addition for the time being. They designated Caleb Bosley for assignment to get him on the 40-man. So that, looking at the bigger picture thing, is if they lose out on him, that's going to hurt their starting rotation depth in St. Paul, which is what they need most right now.
Oh, the Boz. That's Greg's guy. Man, that's a well, hopefully he doesn't leave the organization completely. We'll see what happens. But going back to Castillo, though, Theo, did you anticipate this? Did you think that he would be making some major league appearances this year at some point?
It was a possibility. I wasn't thinking it was going to be now. Just, I mean, they get all these guys to add depth in the organization to be prepared once injuries happen, and this is just the case of that now. So
okay. Last follow up with him before I move over to Greg here. But what does this say about the decision to call Castillo up rather than Ed Julian?
Julian's been heating up, but like with Wallner, there were a couple opportunities he was probably going to be the guy to get called up, and he was passed over. I think they really want him just to get back to who he was last season before they bring it back up.
Fair enough. I think that's very fair. Greg, what do you think? How were you surprised at that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's surprising. I think that it has a little bit probably more to do, if I don't know, recklessly speculating about these things. More probably, it probably suggests that Jose Miranda's injury is not something they see as a long-term thing. Whereas, you don't necessarily want to take Julian, move him, take him out to the West Coast for 2 games, and then within a few days after the All-Star break, send him back to St. Paul. I'm guessing like that's kind of the way I read that, at least. Great opportunity for Castillo, make a little bit of that major league money, and move on, or not move on, but have a few days in the big leagues. Hopefully it goes well for him.
Yeah, and what do you think about the DFA of your guy, the Boz?
Yeah, from a depth standpoint, Theo kind of talked about that from the AAA perspective, where they need starters there. That's if you are a Randy Dobnak fan, this is decent news for you. If the Boz ends up getting claimed by some other team, when you're talking about the depth that they have at AAA right now, you've got Festa, who struggled in the majors for his 2 starts. You've got Varland down there right now, who has been all over the place this year. If the Twins need a depth start, we're running out of names before we see the return of Randy Dobnak. So if you are a Randy Dobnak truther out there, this might be decent news for you.
Yeah, let's put a pin in Randy Dobnak because I do want to bring him up later on. But if you're talking about depth starters, and boy, Varland has been a mixed bag, and I personally am hoping that they do the same plan that they did with him last year, which is later on in the season transferring him to a bullpen role where he was electric. He was awesome last year when he was in a bullpen role, and I totally understand their position of coming into the year and thinking of him as a starter and really exhausting that route as much as possible given their lack of depth. But if it gets to August, at some point it might make more sense to have him load up as a bullpen weapon that could potentially benefit the big league club. What were you saying, Greg?
You could almost say the same about Festa if you are sold on him, say, being a fastball slider guy. As the season winds down, you could see him being a possible candidate to also ramp down alongside Louis Varland. So that is, if you want to do that, you're going to have to find people to throw at least innings at AAA, at least be ready to step into the rotation in the majors. So losing Caleb Bosley on waivers might, it might not be, the sexiest move to pay attention to, but it could have some ripple effects.
Yeah. Boy, it's going to be really interesting to keep track of. And luckily, knock on wood here, the major league rotation has been relatively healthy for the most part and for the most part effective. Obviously, things change, especially as they get more and more work under their belt throughout the season. But boy, it's going to be really quite the conundrum if too many more pieces fall here. Let's talk about any minor leaguers maybe that have caught our eye. And I actually would like to start with Randy Dobnak. I didn't get to see how he did in his last start, which I think was just the other night. Theo, maybe you have some insight. How did Randy do in his last outing?
He did well. He pitched Saturday afternoon down in Louisville. He's continuing his streak of allowing 2 earned runs or fewer, which has been really phenomenal to see for him. And he's been working on his sinker a lot. So, yeah, he pitched 5 innings, only allowed 1 run. Still had a couple of walks, which I know frustrates him a lot from my conversations with him after his starts. But 6 strikeouts, very solid. I mean, it's bounced back from his last start in St. Paul previous Sunday. From when we're recording this. So, yeah, I mean, he's good. He's consistent. I think a lot of people want to see him back, not only because of his performance, but he's just a fun personality to have, not only in the Twins clubhouse, but, as a fan observing him. So hopefully he's going to get another shot. I think the Diego A. Castillo being added to the 40-man opportunity is probably going to get him the next chance, if at all possible. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, Randy, since I believe June 1st, has an ERA under 3. He's looked a lot sharper. Theo had a great story about him the other day, which I really enjoyed. And he, like you said, he's working on that sinker, and hopefully that can just be because that was like his bread and butter in 2019 when he came up, right? It was a little bit different of a sinker. It was a little bit different shape, but still it served its purpose in getting a ton of ground balls. So I would love to see that back in the Twins rotation at some point if needed, and if there's a clean fit there. Any other minor leaguers that have caught our eye in the last, let's say, week or so? Let's go with Greg first, and then we'll move on to Theo, because I'm sure he's got a list of names that folks.
I did enough raving about Eduardo Beltre on the previous episode. Like, I just got to say it again. You rarely see a man who flips his bat on a walk-off single. What a guy. So I'm gonna turn my time over to you guys.
Theo, what do you think? Anybody else that we should be monitoring as, hey, they've really turned some stuff around, or they've caught your eye in the last week from the minor league depth?
I think we just got to keep. I know we talk a lot about Zebby Matthews in previous episodes, but to also show appreciation for Andrew Morris. That has really been a phenomenal season. I think, if Caleb Bosley is gone from the organization before the week is over, one of those two guys is certainly going to get their call up to AAA for the second half. I mean, Andrew Morris, I think his season ERA is a crazy 1.66 in 76 innings, 13 starts, 1 relief appearance there. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to see one of those two guys in St. Paul as the summer winds down. And I think, that pitching pipeline that everyone has been craving for, we're finally seeing the fruits of the labor of the long-term effects of that. I mean, Joe Ryan was a trade acquisition, but I mean, I think he kind of was the forefront of that with this current group. I mean, Bailey Ober is obviously homegrown. Woods Richardson is pretty much homegrown from who he was when the Twins acquired him in 2021 to who he is now. So,
yeah, no, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I have heard Jamie and Jeremy talking about Andrew Morris saying that he's a stone's throw away from being top 100-ish nationally. Mm-hmm. Maybe if he finishes out the year as strongly as he started it, maybe he gets a little bit more of that national buzz as it goes down, because you hear Zebby Matthews as a name of kind of like a fringe guy on some of these national lists. And Morris has been every bit as impressive, you got to think, just a level behind. So that'll be really fun to watch as well. Another name that hasn't really performed yet, but I'm excited that he got reinstated from the injured list, is Brandon Winokur. He was one of their early picks last year. Really raw, big shortstop and outfielder. At least when they drafted him, he was a shortstop and outfielder. I'm not sure how much they're planning for him to be an infielder going forward, but really, really awesome raw power numbers. And there's some concern about contact, I want to say, with him a little bit coming into this year, but if he could really harness some of that, he could be a really fun player to watch. I had him as like my top 5 prospect of the Twins coming into this year, and I know I'm a little more optimistic than a lot of folks were, and he's going to deal with his warts, but I'm excited to see what he can do now that he's reinstated from the injured list. But let's move on to our big inning talking points, which we're going to talk about report cards for the Twins in the first half here. So we're going to go department by department. We don't need to go name by name, but we're going to talk about kind of their overall grade, maybe who the big dog is of the group, some expectations for the second half, and if there's maybe a potential for a trade acquisition to help bolster that department. So let's start with the starting rotation for the Twins, which I will give them, I will say, a B+ for health. I think that they've been mostly healthy this year, something that maybe they've lacked in the past. They've only had 6-7 different guys make a start for them this season, which is, you'll probably take that, because there's some teams that have had 12 guys start for them already at this point this year. So I will give them some props for their health. It's a mixed bag when it comes to their performance. Greg, what do you think? What stands out to you?
What stands out to me? I mean, the obvious one is that Pablo Lopez just has not produced like we expected him to, where we were talking about him being potentially an ace level pitcher, on the low end of that, wherever you draw the line of ace, whether that is your top 8 pitchers in the league, whatever. He was at least knocking on the door of that, and he has been rough this year. Yeah. He is, you can look at his expected metrics or his underlying kind of under the hood stats, and, he's not been performing at a ERA of 5.11, but he has been producing at an ERA of 5.11, if that makes sense. Just been really a rough year from him. Hopefully, his ERA starts to match his underlying metrics in the good way. Hopefully his metrics don't get closer to his ERA. His ERA comes down to where his metrics have been. But in the same way, you've seen Joe Ryan kind of take a step forward, which has been huge. That's kind of softened a little bit of the blow of where Pablo has been all year. But you still need Pablo Lopez if you have any hopes of doing much of anything in the playoffs.
Yeah, you got to think so. Sticking with Pablo there, his raw stuff has looked pretty good, honestly. Just the qualities of his pitch, the shape, the velocity has been there for the most part. I feel like he's gotten bit by the long ball a lot. He's a lot of home runs off of him. And unfortunately, I've seen so many, I feel like, that have been, he's ahead 0-2 and he lays just a cookie of a changeup middle, and they hit it out. And that's really unfortunate because like we said, a lot of the raw stuff has been there and the underlying numbers have been there. And then it'll be a mix of a mental mistake with a little bit lack of execution and an 0-2 changeup right down the pipe. They definitely need to get him back on track, maybe a little more consistency from guys like Bailey Ober, who we've seen some really good flashes from, and I think he's trending in the right direction. But it would be fun to see Bailey Ober thriving at the end of the season, whereas last year he was scuffling a little bit, and then we saw that in the playoffs as well. Simeon Woods Richardson, been a pretty fun surprise. I don't think that expectations have been huge for him, but he's really come through. He's got a 3.48 ERA, something like that. Mid threes. 3.51. Okay. They've kind of played with him a little bit with oven mitts on, taking him out, or last night we saw them come out in the 5th inning, but he's a 23-year-old. That's going to happen, and he's also thrown out a few different outings where he's gone 7. So it's been a mixed bag in terms of the length of his starts, but the quality of his stuff has been really quite good. Who do you think the big dog of the group has been? Can we all agree it's probably Joe Ryan? Joe Ryan's had the best season out of all their starters. He's performed kind of very similar to how he did in the first half last year, but at this point last year, he was already starting that kind of scuffle, that tumble when he had a groin injury, I think, that really affected him. Mm-hmm. So it's been fun to see him get more play here. What are our expectations for the second half? Do we see anybody regressing negatively, somebody regressing positively? Is this kind of what we should expect in the second half? Let's start with you, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think, Pablo is going to get better. How much better his results are going to be, I'm not 100% sure. I am curious to see kind of the progression of Chris Paddack in the second half. There's a lot of things kind of working for him in both directions. He has been the most inconsistent starter of the preeminent 5 that they've rolled with. They've got 5 guys who have at least 16 starts. Chris Paddack has probably been the most all over the place. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery, and you can basically spin that however you want, depending on what your Chris Paddack narrative is. You can say he's still just kind of still trying to get his feet under him, and as the year goes on, he's going to improve. Or you can say, he's probably going to be running out of gas. He just took that IL stint. I'm not sure how he's going to pitch today before this episode comes out. Maybe he will get bounced in the first inning. Maybe he'll go 7. Who knows? But it's going to be interesting to kind of watch where he goes performance-wise over the course of the second half. And if they're going to stick with him all year in the rotation, or if we see, like we mentioned with Varland and Festa, maybe Paddack returns to the bullpen toward the end of the year. Maybe somebody slides into his spot in August or September. I'm interested to see where exactly the Sheriff's year goes after this.
Sure. Yeah, no, he looked really solid in the bullpen last year too, just like Varland. I'm not sure if the results would be the same this year. He was a little bit more fresh coming into August and September and October last year, whereas he's got 80 innings, probably something like that under his belt this season so far.
By the time this comes out, it'll be in the high 80s, hopefully.
High 80s. Yep. After his complete game, might be pushing 90. So, awesome. Theo, what do you think? Any expectations for the rotation for the second half?
I think since we haven't brushed on Bailey Ober too much yet, I mean, he's already turned himself around from the first 2 months of the season where he was not really pitching consistently. But ever since his first outing against the A's at Target Field, I want to say it was that Sunday night game of the doubleheader. I think it was the Sunday afternoon game, but things have just been going well for him ever since then, and it's been very consistent. He's been the most reliable, I'd say, behind Joe Ryan, so that's been good. So Yeah, I think with the Chris Paddock health in question, the thing that they need to do trade deadline wise is add someone who's in that middle rotation depth that can fill in between like Ober and Paddock.
Yeah, that's leading us right to our next question, which was, do you think that there's a good fit for a addition via trade for this year? And would you see that being as more of a rental type guy who maybe is a free agent after the year, somebody with team control? I think it really depends on who the arm is. But what do you think, Theo? Do you think that they're going to try to add to this rotation mix?
Well, last year they had a lot of holes they needed to fill, and they did nothing. I think as being precautionary as possible to not repeat what happened in 2022 at the trade deadline, but I think they'll be more willing. I hope it's not just, like if you remember all the way back in 2015, they were actually in contention and, they were buyers at the deadline and they just got Kevin Jepson from the Rays to add to the bullpen, which is better than nothing. But as of right now, that's what I foresee them doing is that sort of trade and that only just out of precaution and rolling with who they have, which they can definitely afford to do that with the offense right now, even with all the guys injured. But I don't think you can take that same risk with the starting rotation.
Yeah, looking at the rotation specifically, if they need an addition, I think it's going to be unlikely that they make a move there. I think they want to give the guys that they have all the play that they can. And it's one thing to say, like, oh, what if one of them goes down? What if one of them doesn't? There's not enough room to play everybody at that point.
Right.
You're not going to send Bailey Ober down. You're not going to send Simeon Woods Richardson down if he keeps pitching as he has been at the big league level. So it's going to be kind of tricky to figure out. Of course, we all want to see our team go out and get a playoff caliber starter, which could be an option. I'm not saying it's not. I think you might need to tamper your expectations for that to happen, though. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's in the camp that they should go get a playoff starter. I would prefer that if you don't go get a playoff starter, you just don't bring another rotation arm in unless you are absolutely convinced that you need to limit Chris Paddock's innings or something along those lines, and you just need somebody to eat innings toward the end of the year. I struggle to see a situation other than we're over Chris Paddock, or we have zero faith in Simeon Woods Richardson even having an ERA of like below 4.5 for the rest of the year. Yeah. To lead you to bring in just a guy to be your fourth, fifth starter, eat innings. I would prefer that if they're not going to get somebody who can pitch game 2, 3, or 4 of the playoffs, just roll with what you got.
I think that's probably wise. It's going to be a tricky trade market this year too, with so many different teams that are still kind of in the hunt that are, I think, in the National League, like 11 of the 15 teams are within 5 games of a playoff spot. So there's not a ton of clear sellers, and on those clear sellers, there's not a ton of like high end pitching. That's hence why they're near the bottom of their standings. So they're not going to go out and get like a Max Scherzer or a Justin Verlander or anything like that. There's going to be opportunity to maybe make a play here or there, but I just don't see it. I don't see a clean fit. And I think that if they do decide that they need somebody to eat innings, like you were talking about, I think they have enough faith that they will look to the waiver wire to do that. Or you might see some of those kind of wonky things like we saw last year where a guy goes on revocable waivers in August after the deadline, and then once that clears, they can be traded or claimed. Right. So maybe that becomes a play. That was kind of fun, honestly, last year. Do you remember that with the Guardians claiming those 3 guys? It was just kind of, it was pretty wild. You see teams claiming guys so that their rivals can't pick them up, and luckily we saw that really take a turn in the opposite direction for Cleveland last year. So but let's move on, Greg. Let's talk about the Twins bullpen here, which honestly I think they've been everything that you could have asked for the most part, for the first half of this year. There's been a few lumps, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of by design too. We've seen this team, they love to have the kind of churn of relievers at the front end of their bullpen there, guys that can be transferred between AAA and the big league so that you can get a fresh arm in, or if you do lose them to waivers, it's not such a big deal. So I have been thoroughly impressed, and the 2 guys at the back end, Griffin Jacks and Joan Duran, that's quite a 1-2 punch. There's been so much ballyhoo about Duran's inconsistent velocity. His results have still been there. I know the strikeouts are down, but his ERA is sub 3 again. He's mostly kept the ball in the ballpark. He's come through in some really big moments for them. And I think it might have been a hot gun last night, but he was touching 104. That'd be fun to have that version of Duran back. But what are your general impressions or your overall grade that you would give the bullpen, Greg?
Overall grade for the bullpen, I would put it at a B plus. You know, they're very much carried by their top two guys.
Yeah.
And granted, find me a bullpen that's not carried by the back end of the bullpen. I mean,
Sure.
nobody feels super great when their 6th, 7th, 8th guy comes running out of the bullpen. I guess except for the Twins when the 6th guy is Cole Sands at times during in here. You know, I'd lean toward the B plus. You know, there have been some struggles. The lefties have been a problem for most of the year. Funderburk, Okert, and Thielbar have all had kind of their own unique forms of struggles that probably just relates to none of them having a super high ceiling. Thielbar might be kind of past the point where his ceiling is all that high. Funderburk actually might have a solid career as a lefty, but he's inexperienced. He's also 27. I did not realize that. I'm looking at it right now. He's a lot older than I kind of expected. Old, decrepit 27-year-olds. But yeah, it'll be nice once, hopefully, fingers crossed, Brock Stewart comes back. He was very good in the beginning of the year. I think that he's been gone so long and there have been so many strange reports of, where he is at his rehab process, whatever. He's been gone for over 2 months now. But it's hard, he has a 0.68 ERA in 13 innings. If they can get him back and add that to Duran and Jax, my goodness, that is a 7-8-9 that is death in the playoffs. Good luck. And Jorge Alcala has been looking really good too. As if you've got Jorge Alcala ready to throw in the 6th inning, that is a really nice pen. As the season goes on, it's going to keep getting shorter. But yeah, it just hasn't been perfect. So I'm hesitant to say that it's an A bullpen.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, the lefties are kind of the real area of concern. Thielbar has turned it around a little bit in his last handful of outings, but I still can't say that I would trust him in a really high leverage situation, especially like in the playoffs, like we saw last year. He's been, a great member of this team for years now and 2 different stints, and he's been really solid body of work, but he's getting up there. The sun is getting real low, Caleb. The ride comes to an end eventually, and I'm not sure if we're seeing that right now. Like I said, he's started to turn things around a little bit. He's still very beloved in that clubhouse, and he's taken a big mentor role with some of these players, but that kind of all goes out the window when you're on the mound facing the Astros in the playoffs. So I think I would like to see maybe some addition from a lefty, but that's easier said than done too. So Theo, anything you'd like to add about the bullpen picture here? Any thoughts from the first half or expectations for them in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on it, Jorge Alcala has really been a big surprise, a huge fill-in for Brock Stewart in his absence. And yeah, I know he'll likely be back from his rehab assignment once the Twins return from the All-Star break. And then we'll see how things shuffle around there. But I mean, more consistent than the starting rotation for sure.
Yes.
And that's been good. But like you said, the left-handers, Okert, Alcala, and even Funderburk have just been up and down and nothing really consistent. I mean, Okert's got the lowest ERA out of the bunch, and it's 3.95 right now, which isn't fantastic. So, yeah, they might need to get another lefty reliever at this trade deadline. That might be their only move. You can never have too many relief pitchers, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. I love that Alcala really started turning things around when they stopped messing around with like trying to shoehorn him into like a multi-inning role or like a 50
Right.
pitch outing role, and really just saw him start thriving when I was like, okay, he's a one inning guy, and his ceiling there is as a late inning high leverage guy, which he's really turned into since Stewart has gone down. He's kind of become that third option for them in the bullpen.
And
So if he can keep that up, that'd be awesome.
And in a
Right.
weird way, that's kind of like thanks Cole Sands,
Yeah.
because Cole Sands has admirably stepped into kind of that fifth, sixth inning role, ready to throw multiple innings. If you are, down 6 runs in the 8th inning, he will throw the 8th and 9th for you. His ability to be just like competent for multiple innings, it's not quite the Emilio Pagan role of last season, but I don't know. Maybe there's probably a world in which Jorge Alcala does not kind of elevate himself to this role if Cole Sands isn't around to kind of make sure that Alcala can just focus on throwing 1 inning. You don't have to worry about trying to find multiple innings out of guys. Cole Sands is that guy. He's leading the bullpen in innings right now.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of just talking about it, they have so many different options right now, and that's kind of how they like it. If we're talking about an addition that they can make at the trade deadline, to me, it would definitely need to be somebody towards the back end, because we have seen them be pretty hesitant about using Griffin Jackson, Yohan Duran in 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 games, stuff like that. So it'd be good to have another full throttle late inning arm. Maybe Brock Stewart is that, but at this point, I'm not sure if you can really like bank on that just on the health of his arm and his shoulder. He's had a few different ailments. So it'll be interesting to keep track of, though. Let's move on to the hitter side real quick. Let's talk about our infielders, and we'll include catchers in that too. So what have we thought so far about the output that the Twins have gotten from their infielders? Let's start with the big dog, Carlos Correa, before getting this plantar fasciitis news. He's been stellar. This has been an excellent campaign for him. Really awesome to see a bounce back for him, and a truly deserved honor to go to the All-Star game. We got to bring up Willie Castro, too, who is following him down to Texas as an All-Star for the first time in his career. Those two have been absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, Jose Miranda in his recent stretch of stellar success. So those three I would consider to be the big dogs of the group. Who has been some of the biggest disappointments from that group, would you guys say? Let's start with you, Theo.
I think the easy one is Edward Julian.
Mm-hmm.
He really had a lot of expectations put on him, and the sophomore slump just really hit him hard, and that's why he's back in St. Paul right now, reworking on things.
Yeah, well said. Gregory, what do you think?
I mean, I think we're good to throw Alex Kirilloff in the infield. I believe that actually, I think he's played more outfield than infield this season. But if you're talking about disappointments, you've got to also name him, kind of that first base DH type hitter that's had to play more left field probably than anybody wanted him to. But he has also not been super exciting. Can throw depending on what your definition of disappointment is. Royce Lewis has had a disappointing season, not by any failing of himself, I guess, but it has been disappointing to not have him out there on a daily basis, playing third base, DHing, whatnot. This team can go so far. It can go a little bit farther with Royce Lewis. And so that's going to be a major storyline to watch in the second half of this year. Royce Lewis, right now he has an OPS over 1,000. I don't foresee him keeping that up, but it's going to be huge to get him back, hopefully sometime maybe early mid-August.
That'd be optimistic. But all I'm hearing, Greg, and I can hear the comments already, Gregory T. Masterson calling for the designation for assignment of Royce Lewis.
He's been a major disappointment. What can I say?
What can you
Simply
say, man?
Unacceptable.
What can you say? Do we see any trade needs as we approach the deadline when it comes to their infield group? Personally, I would love to see them get somebody that can hit left-handed and play first base so that we can not have Carlos Santana being shoehorned into that position so often, because he's been stellar from the right side and his defense is always good. But when he's batting, cleanup or in the 5-hole left-handed, it's not to be desired. He has not been plus as a left-handed hitter in 4 or 5 years now. If they could find somebody to fill that role, or get someone like Trevor Larnach to learn how to play first base, that would be fun, and it would be good. It'd be a good mix in there. But do we see any other needs on the trade front?
No, I think Julian fills in that first base left-handed hitting role because he's playing a good amount more than he was with the Twins at first base. So
yeah.
And I mean, even technically, Jose Miranda is hitting a lot better versus righties this year than he was at any other point in his career. Obviously, that's not gonna keep up. I do want to point out that Carlos Santana's OPS is nearly 300 points lower against right-handed pitching than against left-handed pitching. That is, I think, the big gap that they need to fill. I could see them making some sort of trade, but I do think that you also get into a roster crunch at that point where there are a lot of guys on this team that you want to keep around right now that, you might not be super comfortable bringing in a left-handed first baseman who can only play first base. It's the anti-Rocco type thing. So like Theo said, I can definitely see that left-handed first baseman being Edward Julian if he is able to get back on track. I feel perfectly comfortable with him over there. He's not going to be Carlos Santana, but I feel fine with him over at first base. You might see some ugly plays from him over there, but by the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he's over there. I wouldn't be surprised if Jose Miranda is, after the return of Royce Lewis, maybe Jose Miranda is your everyday first baseman over there, and you've got a Trevor Larnach or a Matt Wallner who are DHing most of the time. And, I've heard some Twins Daily writers talk about maybe the answer is to put baseball IQ mastermind Brooks Lee over at first base just to keep his bat in the lineup. Obviously, as Ron Washington once said, first base defense is very hard. But I could see some sort of shuffling where there is some hodgepodge of active Twins that end up at first base and save us from Carlos Santana playing every day versus righties. And he would be able to be a late game substitution anyway. If you don't feel good about Ed Julian over at first base, well, in the 7th inning, here comes Carlos Santana to fill in that spot.
First base isn't too difficult to learn. Tell him, Wash.
It's very difficult.
It's extremely difficult. I'm really glad to see that they've been trying to fit Julian as a first baseman for the Saints a lot more recently. I think that's only going to benefit him, and it's only going to benefit the team going forward. So it'd be really fun to see.
Future years too, not just this year. Like if you want to fit all these infielders on the same roster, Julian needs to play some first base.
Yes, absolutely. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And that also leads me to believe that finding a trade partner for this hole is not necessarily in the cards. But for our last department here, do we want to talk about catchers at all? Obviously, it's been kind of a mixed bag. Jeffers started off scorching hot, came back down to earth, and is kind of, I would say treading water for the most part. I think a lot of teams would take him as one of their top 2 catchers for sure. Vasquez, a lot to be desired with the bat, but then again, now he's showing his positional versatility by adding third base to his resume.
That's been on his resume.
That was
his 12th game at third base, for the record.
Okay. Well, okay. So maybe we'll take him off the catcher depth chart completely. Okay, I see what you're saying, Greg. Anything to add. Those two have been fine. I think you stick with them going forward. Obviously, you're kind of shoehorned into doing that for Vasquez with his contract. I would like to see maybe some prospects emerge from the catching department. Maybe tonight's MLB draft, maybe we see them getting one of the high-end catchers here. But for right now, I think you take the mixed bag that you got, right?
I do want to say that I'm incredibly disappointed with the production of Jair Camargo. He has 5 plate appearances this year, and he's got an OPS of 200. Yeah, there we go. That's how you say it. But he has scored a run, so he's a run creator. It is a little like I do appreciate that they are just committed to just not having any other catcher. It's actually an incredible streak that it's just been Jeffers and Vasquez over the last year and a half. That's incredible. That's a testament to the way that these guys are taking care of themselves and all that stuff. It's hard to play a full season as a catcher. But Yair Camargo, tough look for him. I do want to ask you, Lou, do you see going forward, do you see and do you agree with, if it does happen, the just every other scheme going forward, where it's Jeffers Vasquez? How do you feel about that?
I'm fine with it for especially right now at this point of the season. As it gets to August and September, I think we've seen them do this in the past where they really look at kind of the pitching matchups, especially as these games become more and more important as they're trying to catch Cleveland. For the most part, I think 50-50 is kind of to be expected. Earlier in the season, I would have said that it would be nice to have Jeffers catching closer to 60% and do a 60-40 split, but he's come back down to earth so much that really it might also come down to their relationships with the pitchers too. I know they try to have good relationships with all the entire rotation, but there are some guys that they like throwing to Jeffers a lot more, and they have a lot more success in their games where they do pitch to a certain catcher. So maybe we start seeing that a little more often. Maybe that gets Pablo back on track a little bit if he trusts one of the catchers more than the other, or the game plan is executed a little better. But for the most part, you're going to get 50-50 pretty much either way. So every other, that'll be fine. They're both right-handed hitters. Jeffers obviously a little bit stronger of a bat, but at the end of the day, every other will be just fine. Yeah,
I do wish that Vasquez was left-handed. That would be very nice. That's my big qualm against Christian Vasquez, is he's not left-handed.
Yep, DFA Christian Vasquez, not being left-handed.
Until he learns.
Greg Masterson, you heard him.
He's got to learn to hit left-handed, or else he's off my team.
Swallow the $13 million owed to him, or whatever that is. Okay, so let's move on to the outfield. Where, again, we've had kind of a mixed bag and a slow start from some guys who have really kind of come along nicely. The big dog of the group, I'm still going to say, is Byron Buxton. And dare I say, if Carlos Correa has to bow out of the All-Star game and they want to replace him, I would love to see Byron get that chance, because there's not a ton of great center fielders in the league. He's got an OPS of 800. He's probably 20% better than league average when it comes 30%. To offensive output. 30%. Yeah. And he still plays stellar defense. Obviously he's still banged up too. So not sure if that would be the play, but I do think I was really kind of hoping that Buxton would be a dark horse candidate to be a substitution on the American League All-Star.
I feel roster. Like once in a while they do that kind of trick where they name, like, if Buxton's not going to be able to play, they name Buxton and then they find him a replacement. So they can essentially name two snubs.
Yeah.
Could definitely see them pull in that old trick at the commissioner's office.
Yeah. They're always up to tricks over there at the commissioner's office. Did I see that right? That they had Clay Holmes as their selection to be an all-star, and he's having he's fine. He's got a 3-something ERA as a closer, but he's nowhere near top 5-10 relievers in the American League, and the commissioners decided that he gets a spot. He gets it. Why? First of all, why is the commissioner choosing all-stars to begin with? What sense does that make?
Well, he's got to be compensated somehow. They're paying him a pittance.
Ooh, yes, of course. You know what? We're getting too deep into the gripes. We need to save this for our gripes giving, which is coming up later in this week. We will talk about that more. But let's keep talking about the outfield here a little bit. Max Kepler, he had a super hot streak when he came back from that injury. He's come back down to earth. He's had a few big hits, still plays really good defense. Let's talk about left field a little bit. We've got a little bit of Willie Castro there. He's been good when that happens. Your guy, Greg, Manny Magoo. What do we think? He started off so slow. I still think I'm not comfortable with him as a good defender. I think he was kind of advertised as that, and I have not been impressed with him in the outfield one bit, even in the corners. What do you think?
It's actually kind of absurd, because he was advertised as a great, like a great outfielder, a good to very good center fielder. and he had some injuries last year. His metrics, his scouting reports kind of fell off a cliff. But you kind of had some hope. Maybe it's not like he's old. He's 29, past his prime. If you're saying like 27 is his prime, but like he's still in his 20s. You think maybe he can be like at minimum like a serviceable center fielder. But my goodness, I don't know what happened, because it's not just like he's lost a step. He has had some straight up gaffes. Right. And you can excuse some gaffes like that if you're zooming around the outfield. It's a borderline play. Only 40% of center fielders can get to that ball. You get to it and you lose it. But no, like he's had an Edward Julian-esque kind of series of gaffes out in left field, center field. I will say, like, I'm totally fine with him still being on the team as a good platoon hitter. He's been very good as hitting left-handed pitching. So long as he's not a pinch hitter, he's I believe 0 for 21 as a pinch hitter this year, which is just comical. It's funny. I love that. But he's got an OPS of like 792 against lefties, even including those plate appearances. So go for it. I'm fine. I would be okay if they found somebody who would be like a super Manny Magoo, especially if he's just a corner outfielder. But for right now, I'm okay with my man Manny Magoo keeping his job.
Yeah, I agree for the most part, for sure. And I'm not one to call for a guy's job when they're disappointing anyway. But like you were saying with his defense too, it's not just that I'm not impressed with the plays that he can't make, not getting to a ball in the gap or something like that. It's the really boneheaded things where it bounces off his glove on some random liner, getting lost in the sun multiple times in the same game. It's just some of those kind of brain flub things that do it for me, I think, for the most part. But looking around at some of the other options that they have in the outfield there, let's talk, Trevor Larnach, he's started playing a little bit more in the outfield, and really he's made some pretty good plays too. He's not the rangiest of guys, but he's made the plays that have been asked of him, I felt like, for the most part. And if that can get his bat against righties, that's all the better. Who else? Matt Wallner. We haven't seen, too much defensively from him. His calling card is going to be his super strong arm that he has, and teams are starting to respect that a little bit more, which is value in itself. If guys aren't sending runners home because they are worried about Matt Wallner's arm, even if he, doesn't make that play 100 times out of 100, if it stops them from advancing, that has value too. So I'm excited to see more from Matt Wallner, especially as his scorching hot bat has returned, which has been a very, very welcome development because, it's a very small sample size early on in the year that caused his demotion, but it was telling nonetheless. It was a small sample size, but he looked pretty lost in that small sample size. Am I forgetting anybody? Austin Martin. I feel like as advertised, pretty low wattage bat, can play around defensively, really speedy, good on the base paths. Any trade target fit that we see for from the outfield? What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I don't see, like, the only player type that I could see them going after is a right-handed hitter who could be either a better platoon bat than Margot or a legitimate center fielder.
Yeah.
However, if they've got Willie Castro and they've got Austin Martin, who should hopefully, I don't believe that actually, I'm blanking. Was it a abdomen strain for Martin? I'm blanking on what
oblique, I think. Oblique. So obliques can take a while.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
But I think, unless you're really sold on somebody who can, be that guy, I'm not really looking. I don't anticipate them bringing in another outfielder. They're already a little bit crowded as it is with Buxton, Kepler, Larnach, and Wallner. If they continue to hit to the point that, like, if Austin Martin's healthy, there's no guarantee that he's still on the roster. Alex Kirilloff is another option out there that I don't see ending up back out there. But I think that it's a little bit crowded right now to really be looking for anybody who's unless it's like a bona fide, just a better right-handed outfielder. I don't see that happening.
Yeah. And really, that guy might end up being Willie Castro. If the infielders really shore up and really solidify themselves, if Correa, hopefully his plantar fasciitis, like I said before, is not too severe, if he can keep producing and starting regularly at shortstop, get Royce Lewis back in the mix, Brooks Lee needs to stay up. You're going to see Willie Castro still be used every day, and a lot of that's going to be in left field, I think. So I think that's going to be the best addition that they make.
Yeah, and Tom kind of threw it out on the last episode that if Willie Castro needs somewhere to play, if the infield fills up and Willie Castro's out in left field, all of a sudden now you have 3 guys for 2 positions in Wallner, Larnach, and Kepler, which that could result in possibly, Tom threw it out. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Tom threw it out that it's possible somebody like Max Kepler ends up getting shipped elsewhere because there's just a crunch in right field and DH. So I do not see at least another left-handed outfielder coming in.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. But I think that we've done enough with these report cards. How about we move on in our next segment here, which is going to be an abbreviated version of Picks to Click.
Whoops, that's not one. Lenny.
Producer
Oh, dear.
Lenny. Unbelievable.
No, it's nope. There we go. That's still not the right music, Lenny.
You know what? But it was still mellow enough. And
there it is. There it is. I've got to have a talk to Lenny.
That's all right. He's usually a good boy. So, but yeah, let's talk about our picks to click here. Obviously, we're still waiting on Game 3 from the Giants series. So I think we're going to hold off on updating our scoreboard from most home runs allowed. Just as a reminder there, Greg picked Chris Paddock, Cody Schoenman picked Simeon Woods Richardson, and Tom Fromm picked Joe Ryan. But we're going to hold off on updating that until we get the official results from Sunday's game against the Giants. But at the very least, Greg, you and I, my friend, we can take a stab at guessing what position the Twins are going to select with their first pick in tonight's MLB draft. The Twins have the number 21 overall pick. So I want to know, is it going to be a high school player, high school position player, a high school pitcher, a college position player, a college pitcher? It can go any 4 of those, really. Unfortunately, our draft guru here, Theo Tollefson, had to exit. He was not arrested for robbing an orphanage like me. I already filled that bucket, but he had to leave to do some prep for tonight's draft. But he sounded pretty adamant, and I'm going to let him get this pick, that the Twins are going to pick a college position player with their first pick at 21. So we'll give him that. We'll give him that pick. And I think that's probably the favorite here. But Greg, what do you think?
You know what? I'm going to go and actually name the person I think. Actually, you know what? That was a little bit ambitious of me because I'm never sure if I can pronounce his name correctly. But I think that they're going to go and they are going to go and get themselves a college pitcher. And I'm going to manifest that it's going to be Jurangelo Quinte.
Okay.
The ambidextrous pitcher.
Right.
I'm going to manifest that happens out of Mississippi State, our friend Jurangelo. I'm not going to attempt to say his last name again. I apologize, Jurangelo. But
you know what? For Twins Daily's writing staff's sake, and how often we're going to have to be writing that name, I hope you're wrong. Personally, because it is a difficult one to remember how to spell, and I would rather not be Googling it every time I need to write his name in a story. But that would be an interesting pick. Like you said, ambidextrous pitcher. It sounds like he's going to have a better time as a right-handed pitcher, at least if he's going to be a starting pitcher. But that would be very interesting. He's got some high-octane stuff. Another college pitcher to keep your eye on is Brody Brecht from Iowa, the University of Iowa. He walks a ton of guys, but he packs some serious heat, and he's got some good secondary offerings too. If he has some good development early on, I think he could be a top 100 prospect pretty easily. So keep an eye on Brody Brecht. That's who I am.
But that's boring.
That is boring, but you know what? I'm boring sometimes. What can I say?
I could see the Twins probably not at 21, but maybe if he's still around at 33, maybe.
Sure. And that's the thing, that 33, that their next pick, just 12 later, I think creates kind of an interesting wrinkle too. But for my guess for picks to click, I think that with that first pick, I'm going to say that they go with a high school pitcher. I feel like the last time they were in kind of the low 20s, that range for a draft, they picked Chase Petty, and he was a high school pitcher. And I know this class has a handful of pretty exciting high school pitchers that could go at 21, that could go to them at 33. I think they're going to be in the mix for one of those kind of high upside younger arms, though. But with that down, let's move on to our next segment, the return of Sweet Nothings. Okay, so the whole point of Sweet Nothings, just like Ol Gregg, he gets the chance to gripe about things that disgust him from week to week, and trust me, there's plenty of them. Sweet Lou wants the chance to talk about the insignificant, minor details surrounding baseball that make him smile. You know what I mean? So I'm just talking about the little sweet nothings.
I don't know what that means.
Well, yeah, of course you don't, Greg. We get that, of course. But today's segment of Sweet Nothings is brought to us by our sponsor, which is Slurps. From the twisted minds that brought you Chomp's original beef sticks comes a new way to fuel your day. Try a tall can of Slurps premium beef water. It'll get rid of that appetite in no time. Slurps premium beef water. Okay, so my Sweet Nothings for today's episode. I absolutely adore old-timey baseball names. The other night, Chicago closed out the Twins with an immaculate inning. That's 9 strikes, 9 pitches, 3 outs. And it was done by Michael Kopech, the team's closer. And it had not, the broadcast made sure to mention that it had not been done since Sloppy Thurston, way back in the day. Greg, you roomed with Sloppy Thurston, didn't you? Back in the First World War?
Yeah, he, you know what? He earned that nickname.
Okay, that's all we need to say about that. But, Sloppy Thurston, what a baseball name. Pinky Higgins, another one. Oil Can Boyd, even someone like Chipper Jones. You don't see names like that in other sports, and I absolutely love, these quintessential old-fashioned names that can only be found in baseball. And it's one of the game's most underappreciated elements, and it's one of its most charming. You know what I mean? In what other sport can you find legends with names like Catfish Hunter and Stubby Clapp and our guy Boof Bonzer? Those aren't pipe fitters out in the country. Well, except for Boof Bonzer, of course. He actually is a pipe fitter out in the boonies. But, these are world-class athletes with just ridiculous names, and I love it. It makes me smile. Greg, do you have any sort of old-timey baseball name that you would have picked for yourself?
Yeah, I would have gone with Blasters Masterson.
Okay. Blasters Masterson. That is sure to become viral here. Mr. Blasters. When I was younger, I played in a baseball team that everybody was required to think of a nickname for themselves. And I had trouble coming up with one. So our team captain was trying to help me. I can't remember exactly how we got there. I think I was wearing a Simpsons t-shirt when I was at practice one day, and he's like, "Oh, you like funny stuff, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, just like pretty much everybody else on this planet." But he dubbed me the nickname Haha. So Ha Ha Hennessy would be my old-timey baseball name, I'm pretty sure. But
I mean, you're already walking around with a old-timey baseball name. Like
that's true.
if you were like, in 1931, a fella by the name of Sweet Lou Hennessy struck out 9 players en route to his 37 wins in his 49 starts.
Yes.
I wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I really appreciate that the name Sweet Lou has stuck around. Honestly, I didn't make it for myself. People, I feel like strangers will meet me and they'll just say Sweet Lou. You know what I mean? Like it's just a natural kind of flow of the tongue that created Sweet Lou. But that's a good point. I'll consider that an old-timey baseball name too. But that's my sweet nothings for this
They
week.
called me Beluga.
Beluga.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's something. Well, they called me a small white whale, so I was a beluga. It's one of those nicknames that it was teasing, and then it became just kind of stuck. So for a few years, I was not known as Gregory. I was known as Beluga.
There we go. Well, you know what? How about you, dear listener? Do you have any favorite old-timey baseball names? Do you have one for yourself? If you do, please let us know. Tweet us at TwinsOffDaily or at Greg T. Masterson or at Sweet Lou MN. Let us know what you think. Me and Beluga Blasters over there would sure love to hear it. But that brings us on to our closing here, which is the post-game high fives. Let's go back to our walk-off question, which was, which fictional baseball player would you add to this year's Twins team? Greg, does anybody come to mind?
Yeah, I'm going to go with MVP Baseball 2005 was the greatest baseball video game of all time. I will not hear anything else about that. Back in those days, sometimes players did not get along so well with the Players Association, so they weren't allowed to be in the games. And 04 and 05, he was in 2003, but he was not in 2004 or 2005. Old Barry Bonds was not allowed into the game. And so he was replaced by a man named John Dowd, who was by far, and it was Barry Bonds, 04 and 05, by far the best player in the game. If that was your first baseball video game, you would, if that was like your entrance into understand or watching MLB, whatever, you might start looking for some fella named John Dowd who plays for the Giants. No, there was no John Dowd. It was Barry Bonds. That might be a loophole that my fictional baseball player would be, late prime Barry Bonds. But John Dowd, what a legend. There were other players like Bill Miller, not Bill Miller. Kevin Millar was not in that game. He was replaced by Anthony Freese. Twins legend Ron Mayhay was not in the game. He was replaced by a man named Neil Genero, spelt the French way, Genereaux. Neil Genero. So
the Frenchie.
My pick is John Dowd. I do have a John Dowd Giants jersey hanging in my closet, one of my many obscure baseball jerseys. So that. He's always had a special place in my heart.
Greg, I think you need to get like a DH Gate General Twins jersey. I feel like that's the only way we can
he was not a Twin at the time. He was a
pish posh.
He was a Texas Ranger. So
okay, well, it'd still be that'd be a fun little Easter egg.
That's a very deep cut. Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that was Ron Mayhay, and then I have to actually explain who Ron Mayhay was.
Oh yeah, Ron Mayhay, the classic.
Of course.
Sorry if you're listening to this, Ron. I know you're a huge fan of the show. You're always welcome to come gab with us. So let's get you on. Okay, well, I think my answer. I think there's a movie. Maybe mid '90s, late '90s. It was called The Scout. And it was about a fictional scout, and obviously his player, it was kind of his last chance to keep his job. He had to go find this phenom, and the phenom was played by the actor Brendan Fraser, and his name I think was Steve Nebraska, and he was just a pitcher who could throw 100 miles an hour. He was incredible. Excellent raw stuff. And he, in the game at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, if you have not seen The Scout and you want to know how it ends, put this on mute real quick. He throws not just an immaculate inning, he throws 9 of them in a row, and he throws an immaculate game with 81 pitches and 27 strikeouts. And I would add that to any team in baseball, and I would pay any amount of money to watch him pitch and get an immaculate game. So I'm going to go with Steve Nebraska on the Minnesota Twins. With that done, let's take a quick look ahead at our schedule for the rest of this week. As we said, this is the All-Star Break Podnanza from your friends at Twins Off Daily, and we're going to be with you not just today, but for the next 4 days as well. So we're going to have a All-Star special coming out tomorrow before MLB's All-Star game on Tuesday, and then we are going to have 3 more episodes with some fun stuff mixed in, including a draft recap episode with our friend Jamie Cameron, and something we're calling Gripes Giving. And I think you can all gather what that's going to be. So until then, we can sign off here. We will talk to you again tomorrow. And Greg, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I've got a list of old-timey player names that I'd like to read for the class.
Love it.
Cocoa Crisp. That's not so old-timey, but it's just an immaculate name. Buttercup Dickerson.
Okay.
Johnny Dickshot. Snuffy Sternweiss. Cannonball Titcomb. Home Run Baker. Three Finger Brown. Orville Overall. Johnny Glasscock. And Rusty